Thank you, Mindy.
That was so fun.
All right. Well, I am really excited to have Mindy Lockard on the podcast today. And it's always good. I get to see you a little bit here too. So it's always good to connect with you, Mindy. Thank you for doing this.
Oh my gosh, I've been excited about this all day. So I'm
Really?
looking forward to it. Yes.
Me too. Me too. You're like a lot of the people that I think about when I think about this podcast. It's like, why do I want to talk to Mindy and share Mindy with, the listeners? And it's because you're endlessly fascinating, which of course makes it kind of difficult to know where to where to focus. You've got so many different things you do and talents. So before we get into our conversation, what would you want someone to, like, on a high level, just sort of an introduction of sort of what you do? And
Yeah, sure. Well, as you said, it's multifaceted and I've been doing it for about 15 years. So I will try to give it as short as possible. But I started teaching etiquette 16 years ago, actually almost 17 years ago, and
wow.
really found that my desire in working with my students was less about the fork and more about instilling confidence in people. And I think that when people feel confident, they are kinder. And etiquette, actually, manners comes from the Latin root of the word manus, which means of the hand. So manners essentially are how we handle not only ourselves, but how we handle others. And when we feel good about ourselves, we feel confident. And kind of etiquette is that piece
Mm.
that allows us to know what to do in situations so that we can feel confident. And so, well, I still do teach a lot about the fork, and I'm still very passionate about it. I also am especially passionate about the heart that goes into why we behave and why we do things a certain way.
Okay. Now the brand, your etiquette brand,
Mm-hmm.
you've got several different things going. What would be your top one or two sort of etiquette related
Well, it's
brands
funny.
or
I found that when I
activities?
used the word etiquette, people didn't really want to hang out with me, or they'd get really uncomfortable, or they would feel like I was judging them, which is rude to do, by the way. So if you hang out with me,
Right.
I'm not judging you, because that's like the ultimate bad manner. But I would say that I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought here.
Well, we're talking about just the etiquette sort of brands that you've
Okay, yeah. So what I
started.
found was that people didn't necessarily, the word etiquette made people feel very uncomfortable. And so when I first started, my title was etiquette consultant. I'm trained and certified through the Protocol School of Washington out of DC, which is considered the Harvard of the etiquette, the United States of American etiquette industry.
Okay.
And so, but what I did was I started kind of researching and looking at words that people were more comfortable with than the word etiquette. And I found gracious to be one of those words. And that was really kind of more of the heart of how I feel about things and what I want. And also leadership, because when we know how to handle ourselves, when we're confident in ourselves, when we handle other people well, we rise to the top. And ultimately, people that becomes a really good characteristic of leadership. So I've really, people ask me to start a cotillion here out West, and I said no, but I will start a leadership academy, because if we're going to empower people, I want to empower them towards leadership and not just setting the table and dancing.
So you actually went to school for etiquette,
I did.
and that
Yeah.
was it was after your college days?
Yes.
Or,
So I'm a communications major. So I've always been
right.
fascinated about human interactions anyway. And then I got married, and I kind of dabbled, and I worked for a music presenting company. Again, I was in community relations. So relationships and development, networking has always been just the fiber of who I am. And then a friend asked me to teach her daughter etiquette because I like to entertain, and I said no. I went to finishing school when I was 8, and that definitely does not make you an expert at 28, which is how old I was. But I said, I will find someone in the area to teach you. And I couldn't find anything. But the Protocol School of Washington kept coming up, and I'd seen her on Oprah, and at that point, like Oprah was kind of like the end all of like
Right.
information and people. And so I kind of put together a little chicken scratch business plan for my husband, and ended up flying back east for this really intensive 5-day program with a suitcase, because we didn't have soft documents at that point. And the rest is history.
Wow. Okay, so you said you put a business plan together for your husband.
Yes.
Okay. When he saw the business plan, because you had already talked to him about it, obviously. A little bit, right?
Of.
Or did you give it to him cold?
I work fast. I get an idea and I'm like, not sleeping on it. So
yeah.
I wouldn't say that he had really known that this was coming. I will say, though, that when he asked my mom to marry me, she said, Mindy's going to start a business someday. And if I say yes, you just have to commit to letting her do the things that she needs to do for who she is. And so basically he heard that when I presented the business plan and said, I promised your mom that I wouldn't say no. So I guess
I'm boxed in. I'm boxed in.
And the business plan basically was, this is how I can pay back the education and the, the cost and the investment that we're doing, and kind of doing a little forecasting. But, forecasting it's just.
Yeah. It's pie in the sky.
Exactly.
I remember a venture capitalist telling me years ago when I was doing a business plan competition during law school. Actually, I worked with the business school a bit. And he said, we actually don't pay much attention to the charts and graphs because they're meaningless.
Yeah, they are. Like I think that's one thing I've learned definitely as an entrepreneur is not to be disappointed by your own forecasting.
Yeah. But who you are is actually much more important in the long run. So what did he ask you, if anything, when he saw the plan?
The one great thing about Ty is he really trusts me, and he knows that even, that, I don't know if you've ever seen that entrepreneur like graph where like it should be this straight arrow, but it's actually like this crazy like scribble to your point. He knows that I'm determined. So it's as I always say, that the journey doesn't look pretty. The outcome usually does for me, because I'm pretty into details. But he knew that I was going to be good, whatever the journey looked like, I think.
Yeah. So you go off to I'm sorry, what was the name of it again? It's called
Protocol School of Washington.
Protocol School of Washington.
Yes.
I mean, that sounds intimidating, to be honest.
And the funny thing is so I was the youngest, and I don't look as young now as I did when I was 28, but my luggage was lost. So so the founder of the Protocol School of Washington, her name's Dorothea Johnson, and she's actually the grandmother of Liv Tyler.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
When Liv's father, Steven Tyler, and mother, who's a famous model, were on the road, she took care of Liv. So she moved the school to Portland, Maine. So I land in Portland, Maine. I had a terrible flight. I mean, it's across the country. And in time, literally, for them to turn the lights off of the airport without any luggage.
Wow.
And I was young, and I didn't really think to pack. So I showed up to the first day at the Protocol School of Washington with people from Japan and people from France, and really no one from the West Coast, in a terry cloth sweatsuit and Ugg boots. But I was wearing pearls, so they were happy about that. But
wow.
My mom said to me, because I called her, and she said, you're going to go down to the concierge, you're going to get a toothbrush and toothpaste, you're going to put that suit on, and you're going to walk in with confidence. And what I learned that day, even though the attire was very strict and I clearly was breaking all of the rules, I was treated with incredible grace and forgiveness and kindness. And I learned that we think all these things are etiquette, and really it's how we treat other people. And so
Yeah.
there was a huge shift in my thinking of why I was even there out of that experience.
What? So right out of the gate.
Oh, I mean, it was, I felt like the halls of the hotel were closing in on me as
Yeah.
I entered into the room. I went through an 8 hours of etiquette training plus a formal lunch in a terry cloth sweatsuit and UGG boots. Yeah.
I don't even know
I
what to
was
say.
comfortable.
That's
I think I was
yeah.
the most
Yeah.
comfortable person in the room.
Yeah, right.
But yes. Yes.
How many people were in the program with you?
So, I mean, there are, I think in that specific little cohort, I think we had about 25.
Okay. And
So,
were you surprised by kind of who the people were, or was it what you expected? I mean, what when you walk in a room of people who've flown, in some cases from around the world, to study etiquette,
mm-hmm.
um, I don't know what stereotypes come to mind, but I was just wondering what kind of environment you walked
There were no
into.
surprises. There were no surprises. It was pretty much what I had expected. The women, I mean, I was the youngest. There wasn't anyone from, there wasn't anyone from the West Coast. It was women from the South. It was women from the East Coast. Like I said, like Japan and France. And so that was definitely what I had expected. I loved it. I love meeting people. So for me, it was fascinating. And I asked a lot of cultural questions. I went to a sushi dinner one night. I took the woman from Japan out and just asked her to teach me, the ways of sushi etiquette from like a Japanese perspective. So
Yeah.
it was one of the best experiences of my life.
Any relationships that have endured from that experience?
It's interesting. What's sad kind of about that season is that this was like on the cusp of kind of the digital age. And so, like I said, they asked me to bring a suitcase to bring back the curriculum. That's the season of time that it was in. Like I had to copy it with a copy machine. It wasn't like bring a thumb drive and we'll transfer all the
download
information.
it from the cloud. Yeah, right.
Exactly. There wasn't any of that. And so it's sad because I did keep up with them a little bit via email, but things have changed so much that we got like a list, like a paper list of the people, and I don't have that.
What were I mean, at the time you went in there, because I hear stories about relationships, your husband, your mother helping you through this, then the other people in the program. I guess, what was your vision for yourself going in, and was it similar or different from the other people who were in the program?
Well, I think that it was very different. I think I've always had a bigger vision for what I wanted out of this than the people in the program. A lot of the people in the program went back and just did children's classes or did college, and university programs. And I really wanted to start a conversation. And really was an early adopter of using digital as a mode of communication for this thought, basically. Yeah. And so, and I also, I learned a lot and I became a student of it. And so, shortly, I would say maybe 5 years after I'd been doing the classes and kind of felt confident enough to start kind of creating my own curriculum and my own kind of perspective on it. I went back to New York, and my goal was to go back to New York once a year and really kind of pound the pavement there and create an arsenal of, and this goes back to our whole talk about networking and communication. Right. I'm a firm believer that I wasn't going to be an expert in the area of etiquette, but I was going to be a resource, and I knew that I needed resources if that was going to be the case. Like I wasn't going to be the expert that didn't ever learn anything. And so one of my most incredible people His name's Peter Hopkins, and he was the historian for Crane Stationery.
Mm.
And stationery is a fiber to the whole etiquette kind of
Literally
world,
and figuratively. Yeah.
literally and figuratively. And Peter single-handedly changed my career.
Whoa. All right.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
So, one of the first things I did is I went to the National Stationery Show, kind of when I decided that I was going to take this more national or global, and I just was going to meet people. I printed business cards. I had a new kind of website. I had a new publication called Manner of the Month that I was writing that people subscribed to. And so I walked into the Crane booth, which was the stationery show has changed a lot. It's gotten a lot smaller, but this was kind of in like the heyday of it. And Crane had this enormous, gorgeous booth. And I just walked into it and said, I'm Mindy Lockard, and I'm an etiquette consultant. And I'm looking for someone at Crane that I can use as a resource when people ask me questions about stationery and writing, and I want to go to the top. And they said, it's so funny, our historian happens to be here, and his name's Peter Hopkins. And so they took me to the very back of the booth, and Peter and I sat there and we talked for probably about 30 minutes. And by the end of the conversation, he had asked me to blog for them.
Wow.
And then I'm an etiquette consultant in the Pacific Northwest, which is very counterculture and not necessarily
flannel and Subaru.
Right.
Yeah.
Not necessarily something that global experts are going to be reaching out to someone, on the West Coast. But I knew that if I had TV and media, kind of support in my arsenal, that I would be taken more seriously.
Yeah.
And so from then on, Peter would invite me at the stationery show, as long as he worked for Crane. Unfortunately, he no longer works for them, but he would invite me to sit with him, and everyone wanted to see Crane Stationery at the National Stationery Show. Celebrities and companies and magazines, and he would let me sit with him. And as they came in and introduced them to me, he was just such an incredible advocate. And it all came from the fact that I walked in and said, I'm not an expert, but can you help me? Mm-hmm.
So you basically just told him the blunt truth with a smile on your face and asked for help.
Yeah. I think humility, as we talk about what it means to be like in this space of desire and passion for something, the willingness, that has been the magic recipe for any like kind of successful endeavor that I've had, and connecting with people, is the willingness just to listen to them and to kind of rely on them and their resources and learn from them. The most authentic relationships, and actually the best connections. From that relationship, I was in lots in Style magazine thanks to that, and
oh wow. So you were writing articles and blogs and
No, I was a resource. So
okay.
When someone was doing an article on etiquette, or they would reach out to me.
Okay, so you were like the expert resource, so they could cite you in an article. I think you're still cited in articles. I think there was not long ago, right? Washington Post or New York Times or something.
Yeah, I have a great relationship with Washington Post.
Yeah. Wow. So thinking about etiquette, like I'm trying to imagine I can just imagine sort of all of the stuffy stuff that you were working on. What people might think of stuffy, right? How many forks do you put out? Where do you how far apart are they? How do you shine the silver? All of that sort of Downton Abbey kind of stuff. But I think it's much bigger than that. But I'm wondering of all of that, what was the thing that you were like, yeah, not so much?
Oh, interesting. What do I feel not so much about in etiquette? Well, I'm not so much about the socioeconomic aspect of what people believe etiquette to be. It actually kind of makes me even feel like sick even thinking about that. I think that etiquette is sadly, etiquette is thought to be for a certain socioeconomic, and yet I find that people of any sort of success tend to need etiquette the most in terms of manners. I once had an etiquette consultant from the South say that my fork was like, what did she say? That my the placement of my, so I used to write for Forbes Women,
Yeah.
and she commented that my place setting was just off by like an inch, and that's the stuff I have no tolerance for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's not what this is about. If people are setting the table, that's awesome. If they're bringing their family together and they're using these tools to feel confident about
Right.
themselves, but if we're going to get the ruler out, then I'm done here. Like that's just not my style.
I had a feeling that was good. I mean, I didn't know when I asked you that question because I feel like your purpose is about connection and people and having authentic interactions. So some of the, it's like a lot of things in life. If you can use procedure or policy um, to put yourself in a prison and put others in a prison. It's like a control mechanism.
Absolutely. And
Right.
that is what I think, when we talked about kind of that mission that I had that was different than, and there were beautiful, amazing people at the Protocol School of Washington that really just wanted to take the curriculum back and teach kids. And that's great. For me, I wanted it to be bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the fact that what they're doing isn't big, but I wanted to get a conversation, use that as a method to really start a conversation.
So how were you different coming out of that experience when you landed back, hopefully with your luggage and your clothes?
Finally, my luggage
Yeah.
did come. And I had worked so hard on those out, I had everything.
Oh, I'm sure you did. Yeah.
My day outfit, my going out outfit. So I was very happy. I had invested a lot of time in that. I think the beautiful thing about etiquette and what it gave me from that experience is what I love about it, and I do in my work every day, is that it gave me confidence because I now knew that I knew it for sure.
Right.
It wasn't like I had taught myself how to use continental style of dining. My husband and I went to Nantucket after I think we'd been married for 5 years, and I sat and watched a Chinese family eating brunch in this little bed and breakfast that we were staying in. Poor Ty, like I wasn't even engaging with him because I was watching this.
You were ignoring him and watching this family.
Because I wasn't taught, I wasn't taught American and continental style of dining, but I knew that they were eating in a different style than I'd done before. And so I just sat and copied them as they were eating. And I knew that I kind of knew something, but it wasn't until I went to the protocol school that I knew exactly what I knew. I knew what it was called. I knew why you used it.
Okay. So what's an example of something you observed that caught your eye that I should watch these people?
Well, it's the use of the fork and knife, using them together. A lot of Americans now, especially on the West Coast, because of Lewis and Clark, and, everything kind of becomes more and more casual as you travel from east to west in the United States. A lot of people didn't even use knives. So, we used the side of the fork to cut. So the fact that they weren't setting their utensils down, they were using them together. They were eating with the fork, the tine's upside down. It's, the United States of America has a style of dining, and then there's the continental style, which is how the rest of the world dines. So
yeah,
that there was something different there.
I just realized that I've been thinking about this and I didn't even consciously think about it, but having spent so long in Asia, and I really have not developed a taste for everything, but I've developed a real affinity for the chopsticks because it's like eating with intention.
Absolutely.
When you go in like a surgical device, you go in with a chopstick, it's like, I'm going to choose that piece of carrot from the salad and I'm going to eat it. And it kind of actually, when you can actually eat a lot with chopsticks. You can shovel it in.
Yeah, when you get it down, I love chopsticks. Yeah.
But I do feel like it's more intentional than scooping and like a dump truck style eating. And it's not only healthier, but it sort of gives you some time to savor what you're doing. So I feel like there's a connection just listening to you between etiquette and connecting with others, but also giving yourself some time to be present as you're doing what you're doing. I don't know. That's just,
Well, no, I totally agree. And I think the thing that I've always been passionate about since I was little is experience. I've loved experience. I've loved creating experience for other people. I've loved watching other people create experiences and learning from them. And so I think that that's what has always fascinated me about etiquette is a lot of people misunderstand me, and they tend to think that I like things about because of the rule, and that's not why I love it. I love it because of the experience or the honor involved in it or the connection that it has to a story that came before us. I mean, that's what I love about etiquette, and I think that as we impart this information on future generations, as we're passing down story, we're passing down history, and that's what helps a future generation feel connected. You
yeah.
can't have a generation that treats others well and is mindful and kind without feeling connected to something. Boundaries are a really important thing. And so dining is one of those experiences that does that. I mean, I've spent a lot of time actually researching one of my work with the Washington Post. Actually, I know it drives them crazy when they work with me because I will send them way more information about the spoon than they ever wanted. But it's so fascinating to me about how the spoon evolved and why we actually use utensils and where this came from. So it's not like it just evolved 10 years ago when we're doing it. I mean, this is hundreds and hundreds of years of tradition and connection of people that has brought us to where we are today.
Wow. It sounds like a bottomless pit sounds too negative. It just sounds like it's an exponential sort of journey to, I mean, we could go deep into it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, here you are all these years later, and I know you've got, is Gracious Girl still a brand? That's still a brand, isn't it? Sort of?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is how much we've evolved as people with gender in the last few years.
Oh.
And, the Gracious Girl is, it definitely was a place and a space for what I do. And I do have a girls program called G3, which is the Gracious Girls Guide. But I don't know, I'm really working on this a little bit to figure out, does the branding always empower a generation the way that we want it to? And there's a lot of etiquette that is very empowering for women and girls. And so that's kind of in the mix. The Leadership Academy definitely is kind of in a space right now that's encompassing boys and girls. And I definitely believe that in order for us to empower a generation of girls, we have to also empower and teach a generation of boys. And to be honest, I don't know sometimes that as a society we're quite ready to empower teenage girls quite yet. We still have some systemic catching up to do in terms of how we think about teenage girls. So I right now there's a lot more work that I'm doing with teenage boys.
What does that? I mean, pardon my ignorance on this, or naivete maybe, but I mean, what is an empowered teenage girl? What does an empowered teenage girl do, think? How does she behave in a way that you're imagining?
Well, let's talk about money, for example.
Okay.
So, money is an empowering thing. It's a freeing thing. It's an educational tool. It's an opportunity. It is, I'm in a very happy marriage. I've been married for 22 years. We have a pretty traditional marriage. However, I did not enter into our marriage with an understanding of money at all. It's not systemically, it's not something that was taught as to girls. It wasn't something my mom talked to me about. It wasn't something my dad talked to me about. But for us to be able to really empower a generation, we need to teach girls how to be financially independent. And so they can engage in a relationship out of real love and mutual respect rather than dependence. However, when you talk to people about teaching girls about money, there's a lot of pushback on it. They're not quite ready for it. They're not old enough for it. People are very comfortable starting to talk to a girl, like probably about 14, 15, maybe 16, I'd say maybe 14, more like 16 about money, which really we need to start talking to kids about money at the age of 5. So there's a lot of moms aren't comfortable with their own understanding and relationship with money to be able to pass that on to their girls.
That's what I was guessing. It just,
Yeah.
sorry to cut you off. I mean, it was like,
No,
this sounds like it's more about where it's coming from,
no.
because we all grow up with our own, all of us have our own. There's
Yeah.
good stuff and there's stuff that could have been better in our growing up years. Yeah.
The other tricky thing about girls is that there's something called the confidence gap, and it happens in girls. They say that a girl's confidence drops by 30% at the age of 13.
Mm-hmm.
And once that gap opens, it's really hard to close. And I've seen this in my work. I've seen this working with girls. The tricky thing about that is at the age of between 8 and 12, a girl is ruling the playground. And so when you start to talk to her mom about empowering her, the response kind of is, trust me, she doesn't need any more empowerment.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We're tampering.
She's got to dial it back even. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then she hits puberty and this age 13, and she starts to separate from her parents,
Mm-hmm.
and which we need to do naturally. And we've missed that window of connection and really teaching mothers and daughters how to kind of celebrate each other and getting some of that narrative really kind of solidified in there before she takes that next step.
Yeah.
But moms of boys will like, can I send him to a camp? Where can I send him? Like, drop him off. Like, please fix it.
So with boys, they'll outsource, and girls not so much. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I have currently 75 boys in my program, and I have 22 girls. So
that's a massive disparity.
It's very different. Yeah.
Wow.
I think we'll get there. But I've decided that instead of continuing to try and be discouraged about working and encouraging people on this empowerment of girls, is boys also need to understand this world that they're growing into with equality. And so while we're waiting for girls or girls' parents primarily, I would say, or society to catch up to that need, there's a lot of work that we can do to help boys as well.
So I want to ask you about that because, there has been so much emphasis lately on empowerment and what does feminism mean now? I remember my mom talking about feminism years ago, and she was really kind of out of the 70s feminism, I don't want to say movement, but she was, that was where she sort of connected with feminism, the Gloria Steinem, sort of era. Yeah. And she used to tell me when I was a boy, she would say, feminism isn't about me having more power or whatever. It's about us having equal access, equal power. It's about empowerment for everyone. I think that was her point. And that actually always stuck with me because I still struggle, if I'm honest. I mean, I'm the demographic, the evil demographic, right? White male, middle-aged white male, and it's like, I hear women talk about the struggles of women and girls and the thoughts that go through their heads and insecurities and lack, disempowerment, all these things, right? And I think, well, I feel like that sometimes, and I have that same, I connect with not all of it, certainly, but a lot of it, I think, is that really, and look, I'm not trying to say it's all nonsense, but sometimes I do wonder, like, is exceptionalism kind of a problem? Mm-hmm. Like the identity exceptionalism. Mm-hmm. Does it muddy the water a little bit? What about the human condition of having negative thoughts about yourself? I mean, I know a lot of males, however they identify, of various ages who have had body issues forever, who feel horrible about how they look, who have felt insecure about all kinds of things. Maybe it doesn't come out, in the same way. Yeah. But I feel like, where do we know the line between what is a uniquely sort of gender-based experience and what is a human experience?
Well, and I think it's a really great question. And I think it's really interesting, especially the work that I'm doing at the junior high level, because it's not that I really believe that boys, I mean, there is some wiring differences. I mean, and I see that people can disagree with me on that, but I see it with girls and boys. I mean, I used to have my classes together and I can't anymore because the boys were just trying to get them to make eye contact, and the girls are like, they're just developmentally
Different.
they're
What
just
what what age are we talking about?
um starting about 6th grade.
Okay. So what is that?
I work
11, 12?
6th to 8th grade is where the leadership academy
Okay.
kind of falls.
And you said you keep the boys and girls separate.
I do. I
Okay.
used to have them together until
Mm,
my female retention was down so much, that I separated it so that I could try to keep girls in the program,
mm,
because it was hard to speak to kind of where a boy is developmentally to where a girl is at that stage and talk about social things. That being said, to your point, the boys can be, girls are dubbed with all this drama, but boys can be so mean to each other and very, very hurtful and very cliquey and very dysfunctional. And so, we're working a lot at the Leadership Academy to kind of shed some light on that. They do it a little bit differently. I always say to the boys, if you have to say I'm just joking, it's not funny. So, because they take a lot of jabs, they're very sarcastic, they're very mean, they make fun of each other, where girls would never do that out, but they're very sly and
mm-hmm.
gossipy. It's different, but it's the same. It's
Right.
the approach is different, but the feelings and the interactions are the same.
I like that. And that squares with my experience and observations as well. I just sometimes wonder, how much benefit we get from so much exceptionalism, like,
Yeah.
and how about honoring it, as certainly we can talk about images in the media and things like that. There's no question that that must play a role
Huge. Yeah,
in how
it's huge.
people see themselves, particularly young people.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that there are some systemic, but at the same time, I also think, and I love that you said it about humans, because I do find that there is this shift in female empowerment, and our teenage boys are almost being left a little bit to kind of figure out who they are and what this means for them in a stage that they didn't ask for or know. And so, this concept of developing humans for me is really important. The mode of how we develop them is different. I mean, I talk about the exact same topics and content with my boys and the leadership academy and leadership academy, but the conversations are just different, or the narrative is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but the topics are all the same. We just approach it differently because it is a human component, and the idea of your power skills and how you live them out, which is what we talk a lot about. Is I have my students come up with 5 words that they want to be known for, and then we weave those words into everything that they do. And the goal is that when I say, what are your power 5, that they're not like, is kind one of them? Like, is kind one of them? You tell me. Like, you want to be, is smart one of them?
Yeah.
To start them really thinking about, and for boys and girls, it's the same. Boys want to be kind. I think that's probably 90% of the boys that I have say that they want to be kind. They want to be caring. That's a human component. That's a human desire.
It's amazing because there's so many, like, at least in the American media, and I think elsewhere too, but the ones we're most familiar with, like the Kardashians, like when someone like you in the work that you're doing sees the Kardashians, and I mean, everybody's complex. There's a whole lot going on with that family, and each of those people are individuals. So I'm not even here to bash the Kardashians, but I'm just let's just take the TV show, which I haven't watched in years. But what does someone like you look at, and what do you see when you see the Kardashians?
What I actually love the most about the Kardashians is I love that the relationship that they have within their family unit or whatever is perceived. You know, we, uh, in my work with my students from junior hires all the way to corporate, you know, I talk a lot about our home and our home habit. And you see a lot of who you are and how you interact with your family and who you are talks about kind of your soul. And as much as there are certain things that I disagree in how what's presented, as especially having teenage daughters, that I think can be very confusing for girls with the Kardashians. I definitely have a deep respect for the love and affection that that family has for each other.
Wow, that's a great answer.
Thank you.
Well, I know we just oversimplify everything. It's like, people have to be either, totally good or totally bad. And while there are some pretty despicable people out in the world, most people fall into a range. Most of us, I
Absolutely.
mean,
We you know, it's funny, I was before this I was having I have, you know, everything with um our sheltering at home. I've turned all of my work digital. And so right before this I had 5 calls with seventh grade boys, and I had one call with an 8th grade girl. And we talk about a behavior barometer is what I call it, you know, and the bottom of the barometer is bad, the middle of the barometer is good, and the top of the barometer is best. And as a leader, leaders look for ways to go from good to best. We're not focusing on bad to good. And junior hires tend to focus, I think people in general tend to focus on bad to good. Well, I'm not doing anything bad, so I must be okay. Well, what about going best on that? You
right.
know, and I think that that's definitely a philosophy of working with people that I've adopted is, you know, the baseline I think of people is good. You know, there are some people out there that I would probably say are the you know, not, but for the most part, I think that, and this is where self-esteem, and it kind of goes, you know, we circle back to the very beginning of
Mm,
etiquette, but when we don't feel comfortable and confident in ourselves, when we feel we have that self-talk that we're bad or we're doing something wrong or we failed, and we don't open our minds to the growth potential in all situations, that's when we get tripped up. And so
yeah.
when etiquette is what gives us that foundation of
Right.
not only feeling good, but when you're in a situation, you know what to do.
Right.
And that helps you to be kinder.
Yeah. It really does. I mean, I'm really inspired to hear that the kids that you're working with, the young adults you're working with, aspire to be kind. That there is a desire to be kind, even with all the stuff going on out there and the challenges that everyone faces just trying to survive in this world.
Yeah.
And people want to be kind. Like it's sometimes I think maybe my optimism is a bit naive, and then I think, well, what other choice is there?
Well, and I think we've become jaded, and I think we've become very busy. But and busyness, I think we've lost touch with a lot of our body responses. But you know, science proves the fact that when we are kind, when we do kind acts for other people, that we have like our brain releases dopamine. You know, it's like these incredible experiences that we have just in doing a kind act for somebody else.
Yeah.
I do think intention is very important in that. You know, is your intention to receive the glory for it, or is your intention to actually, you know, back to the word experience for me, but provide an experience for someone else to do something or
Mhm.
experience something lovely. Yeah, but our brain thrives on kindness.
It's so true. And I mean, service, which is linked to kindness, but, intentional. I think it has that intentionality in it that I'm going to be of service to you. And sometimes I think, you don't want to come off as being too, like, there's sort of almost a distrust. Like I found when I talk with people, look, I fall short. I fall short many times every day, even. And intentions aren't the whole package. What you actually do, it really matters. but just kind of a progress, not perfection kind of attitude goes a long way.
Yeah, a journey,
Yeah.
not the
A
destination.
journey. Yeah. So, okay. So you've got this etiquette, communication, leadership, family, connection, all of these things coming together. How is Mindy going to change the world? I mean, you've already changed the world in many ways, because you've worked with, all you got to do is work with one person to change the world a little bit, right? So that means
Yeah.
you've changed the world a whole bunch of times. But what would you say, at building off of that? Yeah, looking back, now you're in the future and you look back. What is it that you want to be? What is the story that you want to write?
It's so interesting. I would have given a very different answer maybe even a year ago. I put a lot of pressure on myself. I would say for the first, well, not the first few years, I was kind of just getting going, but I would say for probably 10 years of just, it was never enough. Like I just wanted it bigger. I wanted it faster. I wanted to develop product. I wanted more. And I think, I think that there's going to be a shift sometime in the future where the curriculum is become something bigger than it is now, or more available than it is now. But what I have learned in my middle age and this season is that I'm really in a space of just research and just kind of breathing in the moments of what I'm learning for that next kind of phase. And so, I mean, I would love to create curriculum. I mean, this curriculum does change lives, and it's not me, but it's the fact that confidence helps people to be who they were created to be. And so if we could create a curriculum that is taught in junior highs across the country, I would love that. That would be my dream, to
Oh, wow.
create something that we can get into the hands of teachers that allows them to be able to teach social skills in a, in a more succinct, a really fun way, a package that they could have to be able to teach their classes. That would be kind of, I would love that.
Please do that. You are perfect for this moment. I mean, don't you think that if there is a wave, don't you think that everything going on, I mean, I love that we've avoided talking about the big,
the virus,
the big, the big, I don't even want to say the word. That's what I'm pausing, because I don't even want to say it, because we've kept out of that this whole conversation, and it's wonderful. But it's not just the virus. This current situation has lowered the water even further on what we need to do as a society.
Well, and what I do like about this season, and I'm working on it's not gone as well as I thought it would, but not that I thought it would, as I had planned, because we are our brains and our lives and our bodies right now are all just we're just figuring things out as we go. So I think we have to have a lot of grace with each other and a lot of grace with other people. I love the saying that we're all in the same storm, but we're all in different boats.
Very
all
true.
of our experiences in the storm is very different. And I get to celebrate the days that I'm happy and not judge other people for the days, or how.
Right.
Anyway. What I do love about this is that, and I tell my students this, especially people who are very athletic minded, or who are theater people, there's a social craft here, and we've hit pause, and basically your coaches, your teachers would never let you go on stage or go on the field or on the court without having gone to practice. Like, you'd be benched if you didn't show up for practice. Yep. Well, this is our season of practice. This is our season where we're just hitting the ball. We're just practicing and practicing, and we're practicing kindness. If you can be kind to your siblings when you're quarantined with them, when you emerge from the house, you're going to be a stronger person at being kind to people when you're annoyed. There's lots of situations in here that we really can use this season to practice this. So I started a 30 days of social connection, and I thought I was going to do it every day. And then it was just, I bit off a little more than I could chew. But, just every day kind of thinking about a way that your family can connect about some sort of interaction, whether it's a FaceTime call or a video call, not carrying someone around the house or, FaceTiming them from your bed. There's just lots of
Yeah.
little ways that we can teach and practice skills in this season.
So, I mean, you are a professional, you're, a spouse, you're a mom, you're a friend, you're all of those things, and you're great at all of it. Um, that's a lot to balance. And, just a little secret here, because we didn't talk about it in the beginning. I guess we're just so comfortable with each other. Mindy and I go back a long time. In fact, I think something like 32 years, if I'm.
Yeah.
I mean, you're one of the first people I really remember because I moved, in terms of long-term friends, because I was the army kid, the army brat that was moving all the time. And so we finally, by the time I was like seventh grade. So I was, it was like 12 years old, right? So you and I hit junior high together. That's when we first met.
Yeah.
And you beat me in a presidential campaign, which we still laugh about all these years later. And I learned my first lesson in graciousness and from you and your mother when I was bad mouthing you after losing, or no, it was before the election. I was bad mouthing you. I was up hanging a poster in the hallway of the middle school, and I was saying something negative about you, and your mother walked by, and I liked your mother, and she scolded me, but in a very loving way. And I think in some sense, that interchange at 12 years old, it created a bond actually that I didn't realize would happen. But I think that was actually the beginning of it, because as much as I was embarrassed by it,
Mm-hmm.
I can say this now, I felt the love behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is at the heart 32 years later of what we're talking about now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also that, that growth mindset of how we interact with people, because I think that there's a sense in today's day and age, whether we have, it's a, someone that we're running. I mean, we see it in politics all the time. I mean, we are so divided, and when you put growth not only in our lives and in our interactions, but in our relationships, and you open a space for growth, I think that really beautiful, magical things can happen. Like 33 years later, 32 years later, we continue to connect, and I'm so inspired by your work, and I love what you're doing. And I think that is the beauty of the journey, right?
It is. So I'm wondering what you've done in your home, because it's one thing when you practice something out in the world, and you can really be good at it and mean it, and it sometimes is pretty hard to do it. It's not even like wanting to be hypocritical, but you know how you sometimes go home and you go, gee, I'm not practicing what I preach. But I see you as someone who really does. And I'm wondering, when you think about yourself in your parenting, and I don't know what you're comfortable talking about here, but what would be the thing you look back on your years of parenting? What's the thing that you've done that you're most sort of proud of? The thing that's really worked?
The thing that I have done, I would say that I am most proud of is for years I was paralyzed in fear of being being a fraud, basically. That I would say these things and then I wasn't acting on them. But I've really adopted the spirit of grace, grace for myself. I've never once, there have been in situations where the girls are out and I'm like, I need you guys, like I have clients here, I need you to like elevate your behavior, like you know how to do this, like I need that from you right now. But for the most part, I have let my girls' story and their journey be their own. and know and understand that I want them to make mistakes. And so if I put pressure on them to be perfect for the sake of my work, then really I'm doing a disservice to my work and also to their own journey that I believe so much in. And so I think that while I've tried to protect them from big mistakes, I, you know, big life mistakes.
Right.
For the most part, I want our home to be a place where we can make mistakes and we can learn and we can talk about it, and we can make changes and we can try it again.
Yeah.
And so that would be something that but I mean, I'm cranky and I have high standards and I'm hard to live with. But that's my own journey too, so that's um, you know, that's, that's the beauty and the craziness of it all.
Well, crankiness is a it gives a lot of color to life, but I think you've softened around the edges a little bit, I think. Haven't you? A little less strict maybe? No?
Um, well, I do believe that our parenting style was that way. Um, and I learned this from my pastor growing up. He said, you're very strict and you run a tight ship early on. And you establish your boundaries at that point, and then you let go. We're in a stage of letting go right now. I want the girls to have to leave. They have to support themselves.
Right.
And so we were really super strict early on. And I've always said, I'm not saying never, I'm just saying not now. And
Mm,
my daughter Elle said the other day, she's like, I feel like you really let up on me. And I said, well, because we're getting closer to that someday. It was not
hmm.
now, but now we're into that not never. Like, now this is
Yeah.
the appropriate time for me to let you kind of find your way a little bit more.
So listen, you've got these young women who are starting to really, swim on their own. They have been for a while, I think. um, in many ways. This thing is going to pass. This current situation is going to pass, and
Yes.
we are going to be able to travel again. We're going to be able to get together a room again. So, where does Mindy go from here? What I mean, you said direct the curriculum in schools. That sounds
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
actually have not quite a bit. I have a couple areas in New York, in Rhode Island, people who've either been through the program or kind of know about me or have heard about it that are interested. And so I would say that, right now is a really good space for curriculum development for me, and also figuring out this digital platform, because it's always been a face-to-face curriculum before.
Hmm.
And so figuring out right now, so for example, my students are going through a digital curriculum. Well, I have 100, no, I have 75 students going through this particular, it's called the Leadership Academy.
Yeah.
And we're in a digital unit right now, where I have a phone call with every one of those students. I have a FaceTime with every one of those students. And so this is kind of a season where I have to figure out how to create a model that allows kids to learn the information without having that one-on-one experience with me, just to scale it, because I can't have
Right.
phone calls with everyone.
Well, I mean, and scaling is the ultimate challenge for anyone in development of any sort. Yeah.
So I'd say in the next 18 months, doing some pilot programs kind of throughout the United States to see how it works. Kind of
What's
what
the
I'd like.
relationship that changes this game for you? What's the relationship that you don't currently have that will make this happen?
Specific relationship?
It can be specific or just a kind of person.
Well, I think the idea in terms of scaling to kind of, I don't ever really think small. So the archdiocese is, you know, um, that's where I go. I mean, if we
Yeah.
really think about creating a lot, right now I have a lot of Catholic school kids that are, or families that are interested in the program. And what we teach really goes along with their mission. So creating a program for junior high Catholic private schools is kind of an area I'm interested in. There's in New York City, kind of a Jewish community interested. So I would say getting into school districts, ideally umbrellas that have school districts
Sure.
under them or have schools under them would be kind of the thought. I just have to make sure the curriculum is ready and scalable
Yeah, sure.
for the kids.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like it's a relationship with the right superintendent or the right leader who has the right sort of beachhead opportunity or the right pilot opportunity,
Yeah.
and then scale
Yeah.
from there. Yeah. Um, we could talk for hours, and I just every time you and I talk, it just gets better and better. I mean, truly.
Oh, I
I
know.
mean, it really does. I don't know. This keeps coming up in my head. I'm wondering the Leadership Academy. Just a preliminary question. What are some of the top 3 or 4 things that your learning outcomes from that program? What do you look for to measure success for the people who go through that?
Well, one of the first is the ability for a teenager to have a conversation with an adult. That's one of my main focuses. And I keep telling, my students, like, this is a roadmap for your adulthood. And in between, then there's a lot of growth and experiences, but the one consistency is going to be the adults in your life. You're going to have
Mm-hmm.
teachers, you're going to have professors, you're going to have employers, and your ability to connect with adults and verbally and non-verbally communicate respect to them and communicate well with them is going to serve you well.
Mm.
So everything we do kind of points to that. But when I hear a parent say they navigated a party well, or they were, they traveled and they talked to someone, or, I mean, I've had lots of stories where students have been on a plane and someone said, I can't believe how confident you are. You're such a great conversationalist in those
Mm-hmm.
tools and skills that we're working on. And for me, I feel like, what? That's what it's about for them. They can feel confident enough in themselves to be able to make eye contact, which shows respect and
Right.
shows
Right.
um, care, and be able to ask questions and learn from an adult without thinking about themselves, and be curious and about an adult's life. And all of these are kind of the gateway to informational interviews and figuring out where they want to go to college and what kind of job that they want to have. So there's just lots of long-term professional successes wrapped up into interacting with their teachers or their coaches.
What would be the behavior that you see in young people that you see also the most occurrences just observationally amongst adults, that, gosh, if they had addressed that behavior earlier? Because I feel like a lot of this stuff is going on in offices, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, adults are just because you got older doesn't mean that you've developed certain things. I'm wondering what behaviors you're seeing that are the most prevalent.
Well, the most prevalent is a lack of confidence. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
imposter syndrome, this
Yeah.
idea um, that you don't know something, you put yourself down, you don't feel like you belong, you don't feel, um, and then that creates space for competitiveness. There's a difference in healthy competitiveness, and then there's unhealthy competitiveness where you put someone else down to make yourself feel better. And that is what I see in junior high. And then I see it in the corporate world too, because we haven't created, when we operate from our power five, which is what I say to my students, when you know who you are, when you believe in who you were created to be, and then you combine it with bravery to just get out there and do it, then you're not putting other people down and jealous or worried. You're just kind of doing your own thing and supporting other people when they do their own thing. The one thing I will say in this generation that we talk a lot about, that I do see systemically happening, that I'm concerned about, is social reward for disrespect.
Hmm.
And I talk to my junior hires about this all the time. I've had to create lots and lots of systems and communication around teaching, especially junior high boys,
Hmm.
what it means to give your peers social reward for being disrespectful to girls, for being disrespectful to teachers, being disrespectful to coaches. There's a huge spirit of that. And I think that we also see that kind of in this, kind of where we are with sexism right now, too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so you're seeing a difference between. You didn't say this, but am I picking up that you're observing a difference between boys and girls in this regard, or no?
Yes.
You are. The boys are there's more reward with boys to be disrespectful. Is that
Oh, yes. There's not a culture of social reward for disrespect among girls.
okay? But there is one.
And they're now, I've been in sororities where there is a shift. So before 13, no. After 13, when that confidence gap begins to open for girls, it's a lot more sly. It's
Mm,
not cheer. I mean, I've literally had classes of boys cheer if someone's being disrespectful. Like, it just is, you know, and then the hammer comes down. But
I see. Okay.
yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. But
It makes great sense, actually. And sometimes that continues into adulthood, unfortunately.
yeah.
Um, okay, so if you're a manager, you own a business or you're in an office, I mean, these kids that come out of your program, they go to college, many of them, if not most of them. They end up in college, and then a few years later, they're most likely they're either in grad school or they're hitting the job market. And they might even be working, you know, before
Mhm.
graduating. I know I certainly did. I know you've worked. You've worked forever, as have I. Right? Always doing something. So, what would you say to a manager of somebody who's really young and coming up about what the behavior? What's the secret to success managing somebody young and getting them to uh, creating the conditions for them to succeed, to be who they are, but to succeed and be teachable.
Well, I mean, I think it's relationship. I think it's changed a lot. And I think that, and this is kind of tricky within, ages of people. I think there used to be this way that you are hired and you did it our way, and I'm going to do my work and you're going to do yours. I do think that this generation kind of coming up, they're a lot more casual about things. They're also very passionate about things. But there has to be, in order for respect to be built, there has to be a relationship there. And I don't think that that used to be the case necessarily. Um, and so I think my advice to a manager would be get to know your employees. The other thing I will say is that this is a generation that is so afraid of failure.
Mm-hmm.
And so um and you can tell them many times they ghost. There's a ghosting trend where if they
Mm-hmm.
fail they just don't show up. And so developing that relationship to where they're not in trouble, um, and this idea of learning and training. We have to train this generation differently. It needs to be more experiential. It needs to be more connected, and the freedom to know that there's grace and you want them to learn along the way. The moment you put in there the fear of making a mistake, they will just not show up to work the next day.
Mm. I was having a conversation, I don't know, last year, within the last couple of years, with some, they were young 20 somethings. So they were, 22, 23.
Mhm.
And I was just asking them I was just kind of doing an informal survey. How do you like to learn? Like if you were on a learning platform or something. And what kind of surprised me actually was, um, that the consistency amongst the differing answers had to do with connection with other people.
Mhm.
That it wasn't so much about, I want to learn when I want to learn, I want it on my phone. There was some of that. I like listening, I like watching. Different personalities, some people more visual than others, or some people like to read. But one thing they all had in common, of the half dozen or so people I asked, was they wanted to have a meaningful way to learn with others and to be on the journey with others. And I hear
And
you talking about that now.
so, and we talk about kind of the difference in boys and girls, and I believe, I tell my students this all the time. I believe in feedback. I like to receive feedback, and I also give feedback.
Mm-hmm.
We talk a lot about constructive criticism, or constructive, that criticism isn't a bad thing. And I know a lot of people don't like the word criticism, but I use it in my class because I don't want my kids to be afraid of it. The
Yeah.
criticism is, constructive criticism comes out of a desire to see you grow. So I'm going to give it to you. And then I ask my students to give it to me. I'm like, I want you to give me some constructive criticism and how I can improve the program and things that you would like to see happen. And what I hear from boys and girls in the junior high age is, we want more group activity. We want more crafts. We want boys and girls. Like, I love making posters and doing presentations and working with my peers and meeting new people. And so I don't think that that's going to be going away. I mean, that's the number one constructive criticism I get from my leaders, is that they just love learning and being creative and kind of being let go and coming up with things and then presenting it. And, so yeah, I think that that's here to stay.
Oh, wow. I'm actually going to hold back because we're coming up towards the end of our conversation today. And in addition to thanking you profusely for this time and your graciousness and humility and honesty and all the other things that make you you, that were always you. I mean, that's the funny thing. I look back on some of our earliest exchanges and I'm like, yep, that's still Mindy. And for some reason, I've had people say that to me, like, yeah, you're still you. And I've so much water under the bridge, right? But you're just who you are.
That's nice to hear. Sometimes in those junior highs experiences, I wasn't always very gracious.
Oh, listen, sister. Boy, have we all had our moments. So what do you think, for somebody who's on a purpose-driven quest,
Mm-hmm.
that needs to build not just followers, but collaborators who believe in the purpose,
Mm-hmm.
how can they apply a principle of etiquette, even just one, to sort of broaden? Here's what I'm trying to get at. It's easy to ingratiate yourself with people that you're alike, that you're similar to. That's the easy thing. You can say, "Oh, I have a ton of friends, I have a big network, or whatever." Well, look at that network. How many of them think like you do?
Mm-hmm.
And you can engage in lots of, "Oh yeah, I agree," and that's good. But what I've found is that you need a diversity of thought to make true innovation happen. You have to have a space for people to be contrarian, to have a different point of view. So in order to do that, it seems to me that you need to kind of practice openness, which is really hard to do sometimes because, it's not as comfortable to be with people who don't see things the way you do. So I'm wondering how, in order to build a movement, however small but impactful, what is a principle of etiquette that would help me do that, that would help me stay open and cast a wider net to be open to more people, to have better connections and more diverse connections?
Well, if we're really going back to etiquette, we've evolved a lot to kind of this thought that we are with people that we're more alike. We're afraid of, many times I feel like we've become a society that's afraid of people who are different than us. If someone feels something different, we go to that good and bad. So we talk about the behavior barometer. If we live in a space of good and bad, we don't ever grow. If we go from good to best, then that means everyone is coming from a good space and we can grow together. When you think of a dinner party, if we're thinking of it as a dinner party, etiquette says that you never go to a dinner party and sit next to your spouse. If you go to the White House, they will mix you up.
Uh-huh.
And you want to sit by people, you'll be seated with people who are different than you, because that is where the best conversations happen.
Right.
That's where you learn, that's where you network, that's where you grow. So etiquette would say that that's how you would do a seating chart. So if we think about that in terms of growing a business or growing a thought, one of the things that I try to do when I'm not crazy busy is have informational interviews where I know of people who have done something interesting in their life. And all I do is I sit down to ask them questions about them, to learn about their journey, to learn what inspired them, to learn the mistakes that they made and what they would do differently. And so, having what I call curious conversations with people who are on a different path. And the interesting thing is in this journey of having these conversations with people, I've had the most incredible experiences because there's always some common denominator there, whether we think there's going to be or not. And from that is where we build the fiber of a relationship and the depth and the beauty of our relationships. It's not all vanilla. You have like all these amazing flavors.
I love that.
It's like an ice cream.
It really, there's even more than 31. What was the last handwritten note that you wrote?
Oh, I actually just wrote one. Well, I wrote a few students this week. I have not been as great with my handwritten thank yous as I used to be. But I've been trying to support my local businesses. And so I bought 30 individual pizzas from a locally owned pizza shop here. And so when my students do what I call as our home habit, so every week they're given a goal for the week, it's called their home habit. And so when they come to our Zoom class with their home habit, their name goes into a hat and we do a drawing for a personal pizza. And I write a handwritten note to those students and then I either mail it or I deliver it to their house.
Wow.
But I've learned I don't know that they can read it because I write in cursive. So I have to work on that.
My cursive has gotten so bad. It's gotten much worse over the years. I need to write more. And
sadly, kids don't know how to read cursive now. So
wow.
That's a whole other topic for us.
So they don't even know how to read it.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So the last note that you wrote was to.
So I wrote 4 to my students this week.
To your students, yes. There was a pizza involved. I just
yes.
I got sidetracked. I'm hungry, so my mind went into an away state.
There's a note delivered with the pizza. Yes.
A note with the pizza. Perfect. And what was the last handwritten note that you received?
Oh, what was the last handwritten note that I received? I received a thank you note, I think last week. So, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think it was for a gift.
Okay.
Yeah. My mom likes to write me notes too sometimes, so she'll send. That is one thing that I really want to do that I started in this is have my girls write more letters. So that's been one of my goals this next round of sheltering in place is to get them to write some letters.
Every time I pass a what is that, papyrus, the store, I want to go in and I'll buy sets of cards. And I do use them. It takes me a long time to get through them, but they're so meaningful to get a handwritten note, and it's so meaningful to give one. And I just,
for sure.
I know that's a big thing with you, and it always inspires me.
The quality and texture of paper. I know this is totally getting off, but this is one of my. This is one I have, and just the feeling of it. Like it's just so beautiful to just. It's like a little experience. It's an experience.
Isn't it funny? I never made this connection explicitly, but the literal and figurative meaning, the meaningfulness of fibers in paper and the fibers that connect us. And the more fibers there are in the paper I write, when I write that sentiment to you, it feels like a stronger fiber, a stronger connection. Yeah. Wow. Well, If we were to have another hour, we're not going to, okay, but at least not right now at this moment. But if we were to move on to another topic for one more hour, what would that topic be?
Well, I've talked a lot about my teen programs. I would love to talk about kind of the emerging professional programs and how we help, you know, I would say from 18 to 24-year-olds
Mm-hmm.
emerge into that space with confidence, and the way that they can use these connections and informational interviews to not only land in a place that's a better fit for them, but also with more confidence when they do.
That sounds fantastic. Shall I just mark that down as you know,
Do it.
a
Yep.
definite conversation
Yeah.
soon?
Yes, that would be great.
This is how it's done, folks. You get them to sign on the line, which is dotted, as soon as you can.
It's
So you're
great.
locked in for all the world to hear. What a wonderful and delightful experience, as always. Thank you for sharing. And I know there's a ton of content that's super, not just entertaining, but really useful for living a connected, healthy, vibrant life that's bigger than yourself. So thank you, Mindy.
Thank you for having me, Matt.